Hi, my name is Mason and I work for Comet Backup here in New Zealand. Welcome along to another Technical Highlights webinar. During these webinars I talk for about half an hour on some Comet topics. So there is a Comet webinar every fortnight. We alternate every fortnight. It will either be an introductory webinar for new users or a more in-depth one where I talk about new Comet features, best practice tips, IT industry news. We've been running these webinars for just over a year now, and overall we've been pretty reliable about keeping to that schedule. On the webinar platform, you can sign up for notifications about when we go live, and I'm coming to you live today. It's 9 AM here in New Zealand, so if you're viewing this live on our webinar platform, then you'll see on the right-hand side of the screen, there's a chat widget. Feel free to pop in any questions that you have. They'll be sent privately to me, and then at the end of my presentation, I'll have a few minutes to answer any questions. So anything that springs to mind, any clarifications, anything you want answered, just write it in, and I'll do my best to answer it at the end. After the live presentation, this webinar may be uploaded to our YouTube channel. Can't take live questions on YouTube, but of course, we can take questions at any time via the support ticket system, by email, or by booking in a phone call, so just reach out. And if you are watching this in the future on YouTube, hope the future's good, and you know where the like and subscribe buttons are. So I do this every 4 weeks, and last time I talked about lots of major new changes that we had made in Comet. I talked about 20.8 Jupiter, our latest quarterly release. Of course, in Comet we have 2 release tracks, a major release every quarter that just gets, maintenance, bug fixes only for that whole quarter. And then, of course, Voyager is our latest and greatest, where all new features land. And until in 3 months' time, we cut another quarterly release. And we name all the releases after solar system objects. Voyager's the little spacecraft that visits them all on the way. And Jupiter's a pretty big object in the solar system. We were saving this big code name until we had a really big feature, and that feature is disk image support. So the latest versions of Comet added support for backing up physical disk images. That's bare metal disk image backup with support for all of Comet's features such as incremental forever, deduplication, client-side encryption, and cloud storage support. A few other things I talked about last month were 100% translation coverage into 10 languages in addition to English, so 11 languages total. 100% translation coverage, every line, every dialogue, the installer, the emails, the admin panel, every single error message is fully translated. So if you've got customers that don't speak English, then you can give a fully local impression of your service. And I also talked about the brand new 14-day trial system, which is Comet has always had a trial system for MSPs. We give you MSPs, service providers, a 30-day trial to try out Comet as a service provider and see if you like it. But we didn't offer anything for you service providers to give to your end user customers. But now we do. So if you supply your rebranded Comet service to a customer and it's not a good fit for whatever reason, simply delete the account within 14 days and we'll refund the used credit automatically. But of course we want Comet to be a good fit, and of course it's going to be a good fit because Comet is really flexible and powerful and packed with features, and we are continuing to improve it. And on the subject of continuing to improve it, this is what I'm going to talk about today. And today, as with all of my regular 4 weekly webinars, we are aiming for a half-hour presentation only, with some time at the end for answering your questions. I know you service providers, MSPs, IT people, all really busy. And I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to catch up on the latest Comet Backup news with me, so I won't waste any time. So like I said, last month we released Comet 20.8 Jupiter with support for backing up physical disk images from your PC. And alongside this feature, we also released this USB recovery meter, which is it's a wizard that lets you create a USB drive, and then when you reboot your PC into that USB drive, it's a live temporary environment running Comet. In particular, it means you've got access to Comet without your C drive being in use since you didn't boot from it, which means you can overwrite your C drive with a backed up copy. So this feature is really useful for re-imaging PCs, also for full disk recovery scenarios. Maybe you're restoring a disk image backup right back to the bare metal. Could be from any storage vault, whether that's cloud storage. The USB drive does have networking support. And the version of this, so USB recovery media, really useful feature. The version that we released with 20.8 Jupiter is perfectly functional, but we just didn't want to stop there. So it's seen a few enhancements going into the latest Voyager releases. Our philosophy here is that the quarterly releases, 20.8 Jupiter, they don't really change except for bug fixes. So if you're creating marketing materials or screenshots or videos of your rebranded Comet product, then you probably don't want the software to suddenly change. So these are Voyager features. And so in Voyager, there have been a few changes to the USB recovery media system. First of all is the new UI experience. In Jupyter, it's sort of like it boots up and there's a command prompt window that tells you what it's doing, connecting to the network, and then you just get kicked into Comet, which is great. That's what you're there for. But it perhaps wasn't as polished as we would like. So in Voyager, we've changed the user experience a bit to modernize it. The unfriendly command prompt is gone, and now it shows this nice loading animation spinner while it connects to the network, and then you see the same Comet. The other difference is that there's now a menu bar at the top of the screen that lets you access tools such as command prompt, task manager, shutdown, and a bit more managed and user-friendly way. And you shouldn't really need to get to the command prompt in normal use. But if there's one thing we've learned running a software company, is that everyone's idea of normal use is quite different. And there's definitely situations where it pays to have the flexibility of getting to those advanced tools. In Jupyter, there was a way of getting to the command prompt, but you had to partially close Comet to get into the WinRE menu and then launch a command prompt from there, and then getting back into Comet after that was kind of complicated, just unnecessary complexity. Nice simple tools menu now, and you can get to reboot or command prompt or anything you want from in here. In fact, one of the tools we added is actually a mini web browser. So if you're trying to do a restore and you suddenly need to Google something, then there's a mini web browser in here too. So that's the new boot experience, tools menu. Another new feature for the USB recovery media is the option to add custom drivers when generating the image. So if you're familiar with Windows deployment tools, this used to be called slipstreaming. You'd slipstream a driver into the install media, back when Windows still got service packs. Adding in these extra drivers was something that came up during the Q&A sessions on our launch webinar. We promised it would be available soon, and look, here it is. So if you're generating recovery media and it doesn't work on your PC for whatever reason, it may just be that you need some extra drivers. All you have to do is you click the plus button here on the right, and it immediately opens up the file browse window to your Windows driver store folder. You can see all the installed drivers. They're all in the right format. Copy out the right ones for your missing hardware. I know we have some PCs in the office that have custom Wi-Fi chips and require using this feature to get Wi-Fi working. There's a few more things we can do to make Wi-Fi easier to use in the boot environment, but just having the ability to get the custom drivers, not just Wi-Fi, but if you've got a storage array, then it might need drivers, a SCSI card, fiber channel, custom network card for 10 GBE or something, any kind of enterprise hardware that's not in the standard Windows stock driver packs, then the ability to add custom drivers is absolutely necessary to be able to use that hardware from within the USB boot environment. And the last thing is it does boot a little bit quicker, just a little bit. There's still more improvements that can be done here. I know some people were seeing a black screen while the USB drive is booting, and our current understanding is that this is just the time it takes to copy the USB drive into a RAM disk while booting up, so it's affected by things like the speed of your USB drive. Now that we've isolated that, there's some other optimizations we can do. But that's about all I want to say about the USB recovery media feature. This feature is really, really cool. It's so useful for disk image backups, especially with the new tools menu, command prompt task manager access, the mini web browser. We're continuing to improve this feature, and you'll see more changes in this area over the coming months. Organization. So one of the top feature requests in our feature voting system has been for reseller support. And this has been asked in various forms. Some MSPs want to having an imprint brand. Some people just want to group their customers together into sets. We've offered some suggestions about this in the past. You could use an external third-party system like my client in front of your Comet server and have all your resellers access that instead. And then that would provide some isolation between each customer. Or the other thing that we've suggested is to run multiple Comet servers with auth role only, all accessing your shared storage infrastructure. And that's been part of Comet's design since day one. We split the Comet server into separate auth role for users and storage role for storage so that you can scale these two roles independently based on your needs. But we've been running Comet for long enough now to see the use cases that people have and some of the pain points that you can run into when doing things like this with multiple auth role servers. Like, for instance, it can be difficult to run multiple Comet server instances on the same physical server host, or you can run multiple servers, but it's not efficient in terms of hardware resources. The complexity of managing that goes up quite a lot. So we've been looking at ways to reduce that complexity by creating a dedicated feature for reseller support in Comet Server. We are starting to work on this feature. You might have got that impression last month when I talked about new features for limited admin user permissions. So we're working towards sub-brand reseller support inside the Comet server itself. It's not fully ready yet, but we are at the point where we do have something to show off and release out to you all in the Voyager track. That's the great thing about Voyager, is that we can bring you the latest and greatest as soon as we've got something to show. So what we're calling organizations lets you create an isolated zone within your Comet server. And inside this zone, there is an isolated set of customers. So an organization, like a reseller organization, can have their own private customers within your single Comet server. And of course, along with that, they have an isolated set of policies, news items, storage buckets, if you're using storage role. An organization has its own branding and its own URLs. The web interface and also the branding of the downloaded client software can change based on what URL you visit or what user you log in as. So you'd give your reseller their own URL to access their own isolated organization resources. And this plays really nicely with the new limited access admin accounts that we announced recently. The hierarchy is each organization is fully isolated from each other, but the top level admin can see and do everything. So if you're logged in as the top level admin, you'll see these little other organization badges appear next to user accounts and policies belonging to isolate. So it's a 2-level hierarchy only. We're considering plans for any more complicated or deeper hierarchy, taking inspiration from other reseller systems like MyClient and WHMCS. The other limitation in as of Comet 20.9.4 is that it must be configured via the config file or by the API. I think I'd recommend using the config file. It will be added to the setup wizard soon, but the setup wizard is quite small and crammed in, and because of the space constraints, we're thinking about how we might be able to bring this setting out into a larger page of its own. So if you're interested in setting this up during the current Voyager series, then please see the comments on the feature request for how to get started. There's a lot of information there about the process at this early stage, but it will become easier in the very near future to set up these isolated organizations. So that's it. That's organizations. If you're thinking about having resellers, or if you're currently implementing resellers using one of our previously suggested methods like external systems, MyClient, or by running multiple auth role servers, then this is just another tool in your toolbox for achieving that. And as with the USB recovery media, this is an active focus of development for us. We're still quite early in the the quarterly Voyager cycle, and we release new Voyager software updates every week. So you can expect to see this new feature grow and mature over the course of this cycle before our next quarterly release, which we release every quarter. So that would be in late November. Rebranding storage. So Comet is a white label backup product. White label is a term that's used in English to describe an empty label, something you can write your own name on, where us, the original manufacturer, and you, the company selling the final product, are different people. And that's what we're doing here. We are solely focused on service providers. We allow MSPs to brand the software however you like, so you can give your customers a fully branded experience. We at Comet, we do not sell direct to the public. We do not have any customer-facing branch. Both Comet Enterprise and Comet Go are just tools for service providers that you can take and rebrand and use to build up your own service offering. And we've added a cool new feature in this area, but I'll have to explain a little bit of background one step at a time. When you have your own physical storage hardware, you've got a real rack-mounted server with hard drives in it somewhere, and you sell quota accounts to customers. The model is quite straightforward. Comet Backup agent on the customer's PC reads data and sends it to the Comet server storage role that stores it on its local disks. All the customer sees is that you're providing the storage, and it's true because you are. But if you're taking advantage of cloud storage, you can do the same thing. Have the Comet Backup agent read data, send it to the storage role that then forwards it to the cloud. It's fully private, it's fully white label. The customer has no idea what storage backend you're using. And this is a good approach, and we do recommend it. It allows you to take advantage of the low-cost cloud storage. But after doing that for a while, you start to think, I've got this great big storage role server here, just and all it's doing is copying data back and forth to the cloud, using a lot of resources, providing relatively little value. It would be nice if the data just went directly, and then I could reduce my hardware investment and my bandwidth costs in the storage role server that was just copying data to the cloud and back. So you can do this in Comet. You can just change the customer's settings, configure the storage vault settings to go directly, and then suddenly you don't need a storage role server at all. Earlier in this year, we added new features to help with this and help with automatically generating new storage vaults and allocating bucket credentials on Backblaze B2 and Wasabi Cloud Storage, some popular cloud storage providers, in order to achieve this. The only downside of that was that suddenly the customer can see in their settings that you're using B2 or Wasabi, and they think, why am I paying a service provider however much you're taking a margin when they could go directly to Wasabi and pay even less? Maybe that's not a concern. Maybe it's not a concern for you, but for many service providers, it is a real concern. It's just not very white label. And at Comet, we really want to stay fully white label as much as possible. Let the MSPs create a fully rebranded experience for the customer. So we looked at this situation and thought, how can we white label this? Direct connection to cloud storage. How can we white label this? Can we rebrand the storage destination and hide the fact that you're using Wasabi? Of course, it was fully hidden when you had it proxied through the Comet server, but maybe we can hide it even when it's going directly. We'll never be able to hide it fully because a customer can, look at their firewall, look in Wireshark, see where the packets are going, but hopefully most of your customers don't do that. We can definitely hide the low-hanging fruit, the user interface features. So the first feature we added in this area was this checkbox in the policy to hide cloud storage branding in storage vaults. This was about 6 months ago now. And this feature just hid all the cloud storage branding from all cloud-based storage vaults. Simple as that, one checkbox, it did work out great. The only downside was hiding the branding wasn't enough because you could still open the settings dialog and see the URL behind the branding. So at the time, we recommended that this feature would always be used with the prevent editing storage vaults setting. And that does work, has the somewhat downside of preventing you from editing other non-cloud storage vaults. So the limitations here, if you have a customer in a more complex situation, some MSPs have customers where perhaps the MSP is providing a rebranded Wasabi-based storage vault, but they also want the customer to be able to bring their own cloud storage if they have their own account. Or the other situation is that if the MSP is providing a rebranded Wasabi storage vault, but they don't want to block the editing feature because the customer should be able to add their own local path storage vault for an external hard drive backup, something like this. So this solution that we had offered, it was good, works really well, but it just wasn't flexible enough to meet the needs of every MSP. So in the latest Comet 20.9 Voyager, we have extended the system, and you can now set the rebranding flag on each individual storage vault. This flag is just in the storage vault settings. It's only visible to admins. It's not visible to the end user. And it just hides this one single storage vault's cloud settings and leaves you all the others. In fact, it goes a step further. It hides the entire storage tab inside the storage vault's properties dialog. So you don't even need to use the block editing policy. Just this one checkbox on a single storage vault. It's all you need to achieve full white labeling of cloud storage providers with no impact on other storage vaults. And in particular, it's also available via the request system. So I mentioned earlier in the year, we added the ability to request new storage vaults using a private subdirectory within your Wasabi and Backblaze B2 cloud storage accounts. If you're using this request system to provision direct to cloud, then the rebranding feature is now part of that. So the generated storage vault can automatically be rebranded. Just this extra checkbox at the bottom. That's all I have to say. It took a bit of time explaining the background leading up to this feature, but the practical summary is there's a new checkbox to hide the branding on cloud storage vaults. Really simple, really easy way to achieve the full white label rebranding of this cheap storage, cheap cloud storage, further reducing the need to run your own storage role server. Also, in Comet 20.9 Voyager, the Voyager track has only been open for a few weeks, and I've already talked about 3 really big new features. Just a few of the other features I want to touch on briefly. Token installation. So the Comet Backup agent software on Windows supports a silent install mode. The silent install feature works by, instead of just double-clicking the exe, you run from a command prompt or something similar, install.exe/configure/something, and then the software will automatically silently install itself and silently log in to a target user account. And this is really useful if you're using an RMM or if you've got some way of deploying Comet software in bulk out to your entire existing customer base. We had some feedback that people were, and the way this works is you just specify the password on the command line, and we got some feedback that people were uncomfortable with the password just being there in plain text. If you think about where the trust boundaries are and the user accounts involved and the threat model, I think it's actually fine, but plain text passwords are uncomfortable for everyone and for good reasons. So we've added a new system to change this to a token system. So now you can run install/token and then the password doesn't get shown anywhere. There's an API to register tokens. It still needs the customer's password to log into the account. You can't avoid knowing it for logging in, because what this command is trying to do is log into the account, and logging into the account needs the password at some point. But if you are particularly concerned about having it in the command line arguments, then this token feature may be something you're interested in for an automation integration. This is quite an API-heavy feature. We have updated our API documentation as well as our PHP SDKs and Ruby SDKs on GitHub with the latest definitions for the Comet 20.9 Voyager series. So if you're a developer, or if you can hire a developer, then this feature should be well within reach for bulk deploying the Comet installer silently to your existing customer base. SDK updates. So on that topic, I'm pleased to announce our Ruby SDK on GitHub has reached a stable version 1.0 milestone. And as for our PHP SDK, we've had a record number of pull requests from the community. So thank you so much to everyone for contributing to these SDKs and improving the API programming experience. We're really excited to keep improving these and releasing new language support in the future. Of course, if you're using any other programming language, then Comet's API is just JSON over HTTP. So it's easy to use from any language. The SDKs just help smooth things along even further. Avoid locks by cancelling on sleep. Comet supports a lot of storage types like S3, Wasabi, FTP. And FTP is just a plain storage providers with no intelligence behind it. You know, when you have an FTP account, all you can do is add and remove files. There's no more computational ability than that. When you have multiple devices logged into the same Comet user account, often the only way they will have to coordinate with each other, you know, cross-device deduplication does require a lot of coordination between those devices about who's deleting what files that might be in use by another running backup. There's quite some technical amount of coordination that needs to happen. But this is a plain storage location, FTP. All we can do is add and remove files. So the coordination has to happen in that way using what's called a lock file, a small file, 1 KB or less, that just says, I'm here, the time is 3 p.m. and this is what I'm doing. And the other devices can read those files and avoid doing anything that might be unsafe while another job is running, whether that's a read-only job like a restore, or an additive job like a backup job, or a destructive job like a retention pass. The system overall works really well. Comet is very safe to use with multiple devices sharing a storage vault, even on plain non-computational storage like FTP or S3. From time to time, it does cause issues. One issue we've seen in particular is an issue around when PCs goes to sleep. If a PC goes to sleep, suddenly it's not refreshing its lock file. And from another device's point of view, it's very difficult to tell whether that PC has gone to sleep temporarily and it could wake up and start messing with the storage vault at any instant. Or perhaps it's lost power and it's shut down for good and it definitely won't come back. And it's just really hard to tell the difference between these two situations, because from another device's point of view, all you can see is that the device is no longer checking in. So we've made some changes in this area, and the gist of it is that when a PC is going to sleep, we will just cancel the running jobs. This should significantly reduce the amount of lock file error messages that you see in production environments. What if you really wanted that job to keep running and not get cancelled? Well, that's actually fine, because everything's fine there too. If you know a little bit about how Comet works, when a backup job is cancelled in Comet, the data chunks just sit in the storage vault until a retention pass runs to clean them up. A retention pass will clean up any data chunks that are not referenced by any completed backup jobs. So if you're doing a really long backup job and you cancel it partway through, or the PC goes to sleep and the job gets cancelled automatically, and not to worry, just run the backup job again. You'll see it very quickly catches up to where it was, because half the data chunks already exist in the storage vault. So that's in Voyager. You should see fewer lock file errors in this kind of situation. This is implemented only on Windows so far, but we plan to bring this feature to macOS as well. Performance improvements for Windows Defender. If you're running Windows 10 with a default Windows Defender, then what happens is it scans each file when you open it, no matter what program, Microsoft Word, Excel, Photoshop, AutoCAD Blender. As soon as any program opens any file, then Defender quickly scans it first to check for viruses. This happens to include Comet. If you're backing up the whole PC, then it's effectively doing a whole PC virus scan, which, I mean, that's great, pretty useful. But really, you know, a Windows Defender scan should happen on your own time, on its own schedule, not just because Comet ran a backup job. In fact, it can really slow down the Comet backup job because all the CPU usage is going into the antivirus instead of into Comet. So I've had some workarounds for this in the past that would automatically add Comet's exe to the Windows Defender list of allowed processes when installing it. Turns out something changed in Defender, and that situation wasn't working as expected, so people were seeing unexpectedly high CPU usage and disk I/O during backup jobs because Windows Defender would try and run at the same time. So that's been fixed up. We should now see faster backup jobs because all that CPU and disk I/O isn't being soaked up. But if you're not using Defender, then actually, the ability, Defender it's there by default. It's got to be the #1 antivirus. The ability for Comet to automatically integrate itself with the list of allowed processes is a pretty special integration. If you're using some other antivirus, Bitdefender, ESET Knob32, Kaspersky, WebRoot, McAfee, Symantec, we can't do every single one of those. This is just a heads up that your customers may see better performance if you adjust your antivirus settings so that every file that Comet reads isn't being virus scanned simultaneously. If virus scans are great, you should have some antivirus software, but it should do its own thing, not necessarily related to Comet. Reduce Comet server memory usage. So if you've got a lot of customers on your Comet server, there were some certain things that you could do in the web interface, viewing some pages, looking at some devices, as well as viewing some very large job reports altogether, would cause the Comet server's memory usage to just spike up temporarily while it built that page for you. That's now been fixed. It should be much smoother sailing for the Comet server to handle a large number of user accounts and very large job reports without breaking a sweat memory-wise. There are a few other performance enhancements and memory improvements. If you read through the full changelog, we're always making lots of improvements in Voyager track. But actually, we're coming up in 30 minutes, so I think I'll just leave it there today. That's all I have for today. A bit shorter than my usual 30 minutes, but I think we covered a lot of the main points. Does anyone have any questions? Just to recap, I talked about the new user interface for USB recovery media, to make it easier to access tools in the USB boot interface when you're restoring a bare metal disk image job. There was also the ability to slipstream custom drivers into the USB recovery media. Organizations, the new feature, so you can have isolated areas in your Comet server, each with their own branding and user accounts for resellers. Rebranding storage, the new checkbox on Storage Vault and in the request system to hide the branding just for a single storage vault. Token installations, auto cancel on sleep, performance improvements for Windows Defender, and slim down the memory usage for Comet server if you have a large number of customers or very large job reports.